to this session on last day. It is on generic memory architecture and testing challenges in sub-nanometer technology. It is to be delivered by our speaker Nitin Sharma from ST Microelectronics. So now I request Dr. Manish to kindly introduce Nitinji to the audience.
Thank you, Professor Arun, for giving me opportunity to introduce Nitin, who is a very good friend of mine. And it gives me an immense pleasure to introduce you our speaker of this session, Shri Nitin Sharma. He is actually a senior principal product engineer at ST Microelectronics. He is a very dynamic personality and a lively personality, I would say. Nitin, I am still remembering the rainy day when we used to play cricket and one of your in-swing hit me just like anything while driving straight down the ground. So I cannot forget that still on. With this, I would say Nitin has done his master's from Kurukshetra University in the field of microelectronics and VLSI design in 2005. He has been a part of DFT fraternity since then. Major part of his experience has been with the memory test, repair, diagnostics, where he is responsible for full PM bits and repair solution of in ST till 2013. After he got involved in DFT implementation on SOCs. He has taped out multiple communication networking and automotive SOCs in various technology nodes ranging from 28 nanometer to 7 nanometer. He is currently working on the project on 5 nanometer. His interests include traveling and music, which is apart from his expertise, what he possessed. Yes, over to you, Nitin. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for the introduction. So let's get started. So okay, this is the outline basically, just to show you what I'm going to present. So it will start. I'll start with the generics of memory architecture. We are taking SRAMs as an example. We'll see what are the important functions of the memory, and then because the talk is mainly related to talks to DFT part, where I work mostly, so I'll take some examples of what kind of faults can occur in memories. I mean, obviously, I'll take examples of a very small subset, let's say, because there are plethora of different possibilities. And then I will discuss about the test problems, especially related to memories, how to test them, and how ultimately what is the approach that we take and what is the final solution. So this is how I will take basically I've prepared this presentation just to I've taken the concepts right from the textbook. I mean, to start the concept basically. So I have prepared this presentation taking concept from book, and I'll keep it keep enhancing on the concepts and on the approaches that we take in industry to solve the problem of testing the memories. The issues that we are facing in testing, I mean the challenges that are there. So I'll take it there, and I'll try to build on the basics and take it to that level which we are working on right now. So the diagrams, the pictures, of course, I've tried to kept it generic, in order not to infringe to any confidential data. I'll try not to present any confidential data from any industry or any company per se. But the intent is that, yeah, I want you all to develop an understanding as to what is the issue and what is the approach that is needed to be taken to solve the issue of testing the memories. So let's get started. So to start with, it's a generic diagram. We all might have seen it somewhere in our textbook. So I think this, just to explain, so this is memory cell array where we are basically storing our data. So and then there are decoding logic, which basically is divided into row decoder and column decoder. There are many variations as to what are the constituent components of this address decoding logic. And then there are some peripheral circuits. So this peripheral means, all the timing and control signal generation logic, and then how to take out the data, to write the data or read the data, and how to take it to the external worlds. So in a way, we can kind of divide the memory in three components. So first one is memory cell array, second is address decoder, and third one is peripheral circuitry. Why this division we have done, I mean, I'll explain maybe going forward, but right now the intent is to keep to basically simplify the overall picture in context of how the issues we might face and how to resolve the issues separately, because all three require different kind of strategies. Okay, so just to simplify, we are just presenting a reduced functional model for the memory. So address decoder, memory cell array, and peripheral circuits. So these three major components will keep in mind. So continuing on the say, basics, let's say. So this is a basic memory cell. I think we all must be aware of this. This cell. So this is a 6 transistor cell. Now, I mean, I've taken a very basic one, but there are many variations possible. I mean, it can be 8 transistor, 10 transistor, it could be 5 transistors as well. And depends on the type of memory, it can go up to 20T or even 25 transistor memory cell as well for storing 1 bit of data. Obviously, I mean, it depends. I mean, if let's say these are multi-port kind of memories, then I mean, the number of transistors and number of say these pass gates have to be more to allow access to different ports. But basic storage part would remain almost same. But yeah, I mean, so additional transistors would be for access, providing the access. Uh, there are just to summarize, I mean, okay, just to highlight basically. So the key thing. So we have bitline and bitline complement pins, which are used to kind of write data and read as well. I'll explain a bit here as well. Then there are some variants on the type of transistors that we use. So I don't know, man, if you are aware, but I mean, if you work with any memory vendor, you'll hear terms like HVT, LVT, SLVT, HLVT, and many other variants of describing the cells. So these, for example, HVT is high threshold voltage cell. So and LVT is low threshold voltage cell. So again, I mean, which cell to implement, which technology to use is actually dependent on various factors like speed, area. If we want to pack a lot of memory cells in a small area, so density basically, and if we want to keep focus on power aware devices, power aware chips, so that would mean, I mean, implementing something which is having very low leakage current, low leakage, and just to consume lesser power. So all these things. So for example, for high speed, we would use a low VT cell, so that the transistor gets kind of on and off very quickly, even for a small change in VT. But then the drawbacks are that the leakage current would be more. So all these trade-offs have to be taken into account, and these cells are basically designed keeping all the end usage in mind basically. And again, I mean, we have to play around with the length, with the WL parameters and of NMOS, PMOS, and all that. I think this is all textbook stuff. FinFET basically, again, going forward, just to give an kind of experience basically. So FinFET and gate all around, all these memories, they require some different kind of say parameters. And now we are seeing a lot of new technologies coming up. For example, PCM memories, phase change memories, which I mean, ST is focusing heavily on. Apart from that as well, I mean, there are very and a lot of variants, like, I mean, memories implemented in using BCDs, or there are some one-time programmable fuse cells, or NVM cells we call them. So there are multiple variations. So but for the sake of, say, let us say, keeping the thing simple, we'll keep our focus on SRAMs only. Again, a refresher how to do a read and write operation. So basically, I think this are all we all be knowing. So we select the WL, which is word line, and then if we are writing something, we need to initialize bitline and bitline complement to a different values, and based on the WL, I mean, when word line is selected, this causes the pass transistors to switch on, and ultimately this is a positive feedback loop to back connected inverters ultimately, which transfer this data to the memory cell to be stored. So write this is showing write 1 and this is showing write 0 operation. So, and it's not nothing special, but I want you to keep kind of focus on how many paths are available. So every path or every node is a potential, say, problem point when it comes to memories, because the primary reason is because memories are very closely packed or very densely packed, say, devices. So compared to normal digital logic, the density of memory cells or memory logic is at least 10 to 15 times. So which makes it even, I mean, very vulnerable to any kind of problems while implementation. So you can see the problems can appear from through this transistor. I mean, if the pass transistor is not correctly on or off, the problem can be coming from the pull-up sections, from pull-down sections as well. And because the wires are going too close to each other, I mean, there could be shorts, opens, resistive paths could be there. When multiple possibilities are there. So just keep these things in mind when we will be kind of discussing what are different errors or issues that we observe in the memories. Going forward, again, it's a read operation. I mean, it's again basic stuff. So what reading is, I think we all know. So what needs to be done is we need to pre-charge this bitline and bitline complement wires. We pre-charge it to say, let us say both to be high voltage, and then we select the word line. So depending upon what value is stored in the cell. So let's say here the zero is there on the false port. What happens is when this NMOS is on, so this bit line bar will kind of discharge through this path. Here the discharge will not be there, but here the discharge would be there. This will cause a blip at this bitline complement wire, and this difference needs to be kind of sensed by sense amplifier, and ultimately that decides what was written in the memory. Zero was written or one was written on the memory. So it's again normal textbook stuff. Now let's, so this was basic. Now let's go into detail as to, I mean, I think some of the things would be new here. So a basic structure on how, let's say, cells are kind of placed or organized in a memory. So this is again, I mean, okay, expanded view of how the cells are kind of organized. So each one is a single bit cell, and these are bitline bar or bitline component wires that are traveling. So if you look at it, we can see there is a left core, there is a right core, there is a row decoder internally, word line decoder, and there is a column decoder, and then there is a mux. So all these sections, they have a specific say, function. This organization basically, I mean, how to decide, I mean, if the memories have to be implemented this way, because there are multiple variants of this thing as well. So this all depends on what kind of memory application, what kind of memory we are trying to implement. So if we want to implement high speed memory, then yeah, bifurcating the cores rather than having a common single core where all the cells are present, we bifurcate it. We make two, say, cores, left core and right core. So this helps us to kind of balance out the capacitance and the delay values, and or the delays when we are trying to access from, let us say, a topmost address or a bottommost address. So just to keep the timing balanced, so it helps us achieve a bit faster, say, speed. If let's say we want a memory which basically has to be even more faster, then there is a technique which called banking. So what we do is, here we are splitting it vertically, In banking, we split it through horizontally as well. So that is also one technique which further helps to improve. Ultimately, intent is to divide and improve the parameters or the say specifications of that section. So there could be two banks, there could be multiple banks. Again, there are many variations. I'm not focusing. I'm just trying to introduce that concept here. Then, if let's say these are multi-port memories, then again, because these the bitline bar organization would be different for multiple port memories, then also we have to kind of maybe further bifurcate these left core would be divided in further more sections. Similarly, right core, and then these row decoders will be kind of also intermingling with the core just to keep the timing and all in say in perfect synchronization. Physical shape also plays an important role. Basically, this physical shape is decided by this mux factor. So what this mux factor or column decoder means is, I mean, how many bits? Okay, how? Let's say if we want to implement a in the physical layout, let's say we want to implement a memory which is, let's say, tall in terms of physical footprint. So that would mean, I mean, we have to implement a mux1 or mux2 configuration. But if we increase the muxing, let's say, to 8, so what happens is that the footprint of the memory becomes more rectilinear, because now 8 bits would be taken out together. And if we further increase the mux factor, the memory would become even a kind of a rectangular shape. So all these things are again dependent upon what kind of floor plan is there on the chip, how we want to kind of what space is there, and how do we want to fit in the memory. So every memory will provide kind of these a combination of these different options. So they will provide us a option to go for mux2 configuration, which would be mux1 or mux2 configuration, which would be a tall kind of physical footprint. It might give us mux16 configuration or mux32 as well, which will give us a more rectilinear kind of footprint. So depends on the usage and all those things. Recent updates, as I said, I mean, with the latest technologies, there have been a lot of new advances. So recent, very new type of memories that I have seen are what they do is, I mean, depending upon the technology. For example, for 5 nanometer technologies, I'm seeing that for one of the memory cuts, what they have done is they have bifurcated the left portion into 4 banks and right portion only in 2 banks. So so there are some decisions that are to be made by the system, or by when we are basically using the memory in the field. So the software has to take a decision. I mean, if it needs a quick data, it will write only on the left portion because that is faster one, and kind of cache one, sort of cache one. I mean, it's not exactly cache one, but similar to that thing. So quick data access would require to be stored on the left core, which is divided into multiple banks. But on the right core, let's say level 2 kind of cache. So such kind of functionality is also getting implemented these days. But again, I mean, everything comes with its own challenges. So uh, going further, so this is, let's say, these are the bit cells that are arranged, how to access these things. So just a concept which is showing the row decoder and column decoding. So overall, from the external world, the addresses come inside, and then we latch the addresses. Again, I mean, latch depending upon if we want to go for a dynamic kind of addressing scheme. And these addresses are divided, I mean, fed to column decoder and row decoder. Similarly, there could be bank decoder as well. So the job of row decoder is to select, let's say this is a MUX4 memory, which is showing four addresses in one shot being accessed by the row selector by one WL bus, word line bus. So row will select all four, and then which address we want to access will be driven by the column address that is coming through. So let's say we want to access 0th address or the first location of the memory, then what we will do is we'll give a uh, 1 on the column decoder. Let us say these are 4 bits. Okay, this is a, okay, I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, let's say 10 row bits and 4 column bits. Then we need to give an address which will correspond to all zeros here and all 0, 0, 0, 1 here. So what will happen is at the output we will get a data which is read, or I mean write the data on this location only. So access of this memory cell would depend on what is the row and column that address that is coming into it. One challenge that I mean, okay, I can tell you here is it is not it is not always true that whatever order we are applying the data from outside, logically, let's say, it's not necessary that in the same order we will get it internally. So physically, the address which is going, or let's say this is memory address 1. I mean, this is normal assumption, but it is very possible that the location corresponding to address 1 is not this one, but let's say this one, or this one, or it can be any. So this is called scrambling. So the relation between logical address and the actual physical address that is getting selecting the which memory cell has to be selected. So this scrambling in itself it offers a lot of challenges when coming to testing the memories. And then for these address decoders and row column decoders, there are many variations how to kind of build those. So ranging from a very simple address decoder, I mean, it's a normal textbook decoder that we have seen during our graduation, and going to implementing the decoders using pre-decoder stages first. And let's say if we want to, but these will have their own delays. So all these wires, all these combo logic, when they will have own decoder. And then there are techniques like using dynamic decoders as well. So these dynamic decoder basically use sort of pre-charged devices. So they keep these word lines enabled through these pre-charged devices, and based on the addressing that we are applying, uh, so we kind of select which word line is selected uh, based on these addresses. But so these are a bit faster than these because you don't need to charge full word line again depending on which address is selected. So the word lines are already kind of charged, and then with a small say difference in the voltages, we are able to quickly select which memory cell has to be accessed. So there are various other possibilities also, but I just wanted to introduce these things. Uh, I think that the project that I'm working on, that is basically for 5 nanometer memory coming from TSMC, we are trying to hit let's say up to 6 gigahertz speed ranges. And yeah, I mean, so these dynamic decoders, they are really useful there. When we add, so when in the, as I said, the memory that I recently am working on, that has dynamic decoder for rows as well as columns and say banks as well. So this is again showing another variant, but more for column addressing and bank addressing. But yeah, but the intent is even, again, there are very many possibilities. So one of the examples is say binary tree base. So which one we want to select. So column, let's say whatever column we are selecting. So based on that, one of the bits. So these correspond to different addresses: byte 1, byte 2, byte 3. So which bit will come down on D1, D2, D3, D4? That will be decided by Y0, Y1, and Y2. So we are basically taking out a full 4-bit data out using 3 bits of column. And then there are and decoder based, and there are many possibilities. But again, I mean, the intent of these bifurcating all these address decoding into row decoder, column decoder, bank decoder, using dynamic ones or the static ones, they all are driven by the speed requirements of the memories. Going further, uh, so far we discussed about static, the memory cell array and decoder. Now this is the periphery circuitry. So again, I mean, it's a simple representation. There are many variations as well, but if we have to kind of understand very quickly, so we put any. So first thing is, I mean, this word line. So whatever word line we are selecting, that memory cell is selected, and then let's say if we have to write some data, we apply data here. So the complemented data is generated, and then based on if we are doing a write operation, so this data, let's say, would be feeding through these lines through this bit line, and an inverted part would be fed here. So ultimately, then it is plainly written based on which word line is there. For read, yeah, we rely on the pre-charge circuitry. I mean, and so what happens is before reading, we pre-charge the bit line and bit line bar lines, and then based on the word line, the data that is stored here it comes here, and then sense amplifier basically senses the difference between bit line and bit line bar. Even a slight drop in the bit line bar, for example, it will sense it and it will give us an output. Another section is, yeah, sense amplifier. Let's talk about that. So sense amplifier basically works on this principle. So TP C delta V by I. Now we cannot control these things, but we have to, this TP is the delay basically. So this if let's say it depends on the change in the voltage. So for a faster sense amplifier, it should be able to sense even a slight change. So when it is basically amplifying slight change to a bigger change, that's the role of the sense amplifier. This is one example of sense amplifier. Again, I mean, I don't want to go into details of this, but the challenges you see here are, again, for example, this sense amplifier, it should be able to, for a quick response, it should be able to detect very small voltage difference. But actually, this would ultimately mean that all these transistors that are there, they should be very closely matched in terms of impedance, in terms of other width or WL ratios, in terms of oxidation, in terms of I mean the oxide layer that is implemented, or in terms of in terms of behavioral aspects or in terms of specifications, they should be very closely matching. In going further in sub nanometer designs, I mean, yeah, I think we all might have heard that, I mean, now, I mean, with the technologies going low, there are very few players which are very active now. The players who had their fabs earlier, we used to hear that, I mean, a lot of companies had their own fabs. For example, ST also had its own fab for let's say 28 till 28 nanometer node. But going further, I mean, for smaller technology nodes, I mean, there are very few players. And I think now the players who are able to generate memories and provide to all, I mean, these all SRAMs, we can count them on fingers. So we have Samsung, we have TSMC, we have UMC, we have some Dolphin. Synopsys also makes some libraries, but they get it manufactured from TSMC. So in terms of fabs, there are very few fabs, and the reason is, of course, I mean, you must be more aware than me that the reasons are related, ranging from the expensive technology and expensive equipments that are needed to kind of implement the pitch of the wires or the wires or controlling the lithographical kind of controls just to imprint the circuits exactly. So that all is very expensive affair, and very few people have been able to invest that amount of money. All that basically is driven from the fact that we need to kind of have very precise control on all these components of the memory per se, and not only sense amplifier, but all components. And sense amplifier being of analog kind of nature, I mean, it adds additional complexity. For similarly for pre-charge also, I mean, we need a precise control on when this phase phase bit is going high, is selecting this part. The reason being, I mean, because memories are very becoming very fast now. I mean, as I mentioned, I was working on a memory which operates at 6 gigahertz. So if it has to operate at 6 gigahertz, then this clocking, the clock tree structures in a way that is implemented within the memory, that again should be very accurate. These transistors that are to kind of recharge the device, the bit line and bit line bar, these should be acting very fast, and these bit line bars should get charged very fast as well. So all these kind of issues, when they are very difficult to manage going forward in the sub nanometer technologies, and because they are very closely packed, ultimately we want to put more and more number of bits in, let's say, per square area. So that would mean that when these wires are running around very closely, so these wires getting shorted, getting any kind of defect, I mean, that the chances are very high. So you see, I mean, there are many very say components again. I mean, with offering many new kind of options, many implementation possibilities, different architectures. All these are adding to kind of new challenges with every techno node. So just to take some, say, kind of go through some definitions. So let's say a fault. What is a fault? So a fault is a physical defect in a circuit or system. So this fault could be permanent fault, temporary fault, and intermittent fault. These are generic terms. These are applicable for digital circuitry as well as memories. But on the memories, the possibility or the probability of such faults appearing are more. Let's say on the standard cell, let's say on a digital component, the possibility of intermittent faults is probability is lesser compared to memories, because memories have, I mean, the prime reason is that they are very again, I mean, very closely densely packed. So a permanent fault is a fault, I mean, which basically remains there. For example, stuck at or stuck open kind of faults. So the fault would always be there. It will not change irrespective of, okay, I mean, if we are changing the voltage or you using it once or twice or 10 times, I mean, it does not matter. So it would be there. Temporary fault is a fault which basically is there for some time. So some kind of transient fault which can be caused by the environmental condition. Let's say some wires which are more kind of they are there, but I think the width of the wire is not very consistent. Let's say, so it forms a resistive path. But this can cause a temporary failure. For example, I mean, let's say if we use that device at a slower speed, it will work. But if we use it at a higher speed, it might not work. So such kind of faults are called intermittent faults. So they are basically controlled by the environmental condition, and in the memories we call them soft errors. And we assume that, I mean, it's not a permanent damage. I mean, it's okay. For example, we can use the chip, use the memories at a lower speed. But then there is a third category which is even more and more, say, prevalent and especially in the lower technology nodes, are called intermittent faults. These are caused by kind of these are caused by known environmental conditions. So what happens is, let's say we continue to use some memories for longer duration of time, then because of let's say electromigration that is happening, that might cause this intermittent fault. And ultimately, I mean, these are often repeatable. So we are able to kind of observe these faults, and they can ultimately lead to become a permanent fault. So some definitions only, and then a, a fault, it basically results in error. So manifestation of a fault that results in an incorrect module output or system state. So if, let's say, we were expecting some data coming out of the memory, will not get that, and then this error will lead to the failure. So failure means, I mean, okay, we were expecting some data, the data has not arrived, but that means, I mean, the complete chip is functioning incorrectly because of this fault. So these are just definitions. And again, definitions on testing. Basically, what testing is, it's a process of determining whether a device functions correctly or not correctly. The question is how much testing of an IC is enough. Now we are talking about IC, but if we replace this IC with memory, how much testing is sufficient? So we'll try to answer in coming slides this question. That is why I kept this slide here. But yeah, yield is, I mean, it's a number of ratio of number of good dice per wafer to number of dice per bad dice. Okay, total wafers, total dice per wafer. Then fault coverage is number of faults that we are able to detect out of possible faults. In case of let's say digital circuits, uh, how much testing is needed? So that is basically kind of configured in, I mean, that is understood in the form of FC, fault coverage. Because in the digital circuitry, we know how many nodes are there, how many paths are there. It's easy to calculate, and based on that, we can easily figure out. But the challenge for memories is very different. There is no way to calculate this fault coverage figure easily. Or, I mean, there's a possibility, but that would require taking care of a lot, many factors. So I will talk about those factors as well in coming slides. Let's take some examples of what kind of faults can come, especially on memories. So and how do we approach? So this was an example that I showed in the address decoder. So basically, any kind of fault that is appearing here, we categorize them in 4 categories. So fault could be that we are applying some address here, but it is not accessing a specific cell. So we want to access this cell, but we are, I mean, because of some problem, this cell is not getting access. Or with this cell is not accessed within a certain address. So this cell should be accessed by, let's say, address number 2, but it is not getting accessed by address number 2. Instead, it is getting accessed by some other address, which is coming in, I mean, invoking this path. Some cells which can be connected, I mean, which can be addressed through multiple addresses. Let's say this cell can be okay. For example, this cell can be addressed or selected with address 0 as well as address 4. So there are many possibilities. So just to show one example, let's say if this word line, or I mean, okay, this line is kind of tied to 1. I mean, it's a simplistic kind of representation, but just to introduce the concept. If it is tied to 1, for example, so irrespective of what data is present on this address lines, this will always be selected, even if we don't intend to. If let's say there are some shorts on these address lines, so this will never get selected because ultimately both are getting fed by inverted kind of values. So, or if there is a short on these lines, then single address will select this pin as well as this pin. So there are many variations, but for address decoding, we basically categorize in these four type of faults only. Now, the key message that I want to say is, I mean, yeah, to get to catch these faults, there are some specific techniques or addressing schema that we need to follow. Uh, on top of that, we can think about delay related issues as well. So let's say when okay, this decoder is not fast enough because of a wire that is implemented has a high resistive path. So it will not work at the speed that we want it to work on. So ultimately, I mean, if we try to work at, let's say, 6 gigahertz, but this address decoder is not supporting that speed, then we will not be able to work on that. And these are the challenges that are really becoming a big factor going forward in the, say, technology nodes. So okay, there could be stuck at faults. Again, trying to show some examples. I think these are textbook things, but so I'll not spend much time. But what I want to highlight here is when for any condition, let's say cell is in state 0. If we are writing 0, it will stay in state 0. I mean, if it is state 1, if it is having 1, if we write 1, it will remain in state 1. I mean, it will have 1. If we write 0, it will go here. But if it is a faulty kind of cell, if it is stuck 0, then irrespective of what we write, it will always remain stuck. So this is just to explain because we'll use these kind of behaviors to explain other faults, these diagrams. So what about transition? So transition fault means, I mean, the cell is not able to make certain transitions. For example, this stuck at 1. Okay, this was we wrote something, then we wrote write 0 there. It went to a other state, but when we are trying to write 1, it is not coming back to stuck at 1. So it is stuck to 0. So initially we could write a 1 here on the cell, but now we are not able to bring it back to 1. So how to represent this thing is, let's say when we are doing a write operation, this upper arrow means we are trying to write 1, the state is 0. So this is a stuck at, I mean, transition 1 kind of fault. So we are not able to make a transition to 1 thing. So this is how we represent it. Then there are coupling faults. These, why I wanted to introduce this, these are becoming bigger issues now. I think that they were there even with 90 nanometer technology nodes, 90, 65, 55, 28 as well. But there are new variations that are coming up of these coupling faults. So coupling fault, basically what it means is, and this I think is very rarely seen in digital circuits, but very commonly seen in memory circuits. The coupling fault is basically the transition in bit J causes unwanted transition in bit I. So because the memories are very densely packed, I'm saying repeatedly. So what let's we trying to write something on address or any one memory cell, it can impact its neighboring cell as well. So neighboring cell could be the cell which is connected on the same word line or on the same bit line as well. So, or it can be completely uncorrelated as well. It could be a very different address as well. So we are seeing, I mean, so these are coupling faults. We were used to see that, but now it is becoming even more, say, prevalent. We have there is another variant which is called neighborhood pattern sensitive fault. So what it does is, let's say, okay, we are talking about only two cells here, only two cells interacting. One cell, I mean, any transition in one cell causing transition in other cell, unwanted transition or a fault in other cell. But there are very I mean, we are observing a lot of say scenarios where, let's say, we are making a change to one cell, but more than one cell, more than two or three other cells are getting impacted. So such kind of observations are very frequent. So this we call as I mean, in the category of neighborhood pattern sensitive faults. Another variant is, okay, let's consider this scenario. So let's say I mean, a cell is written 0, but its neighbors are all ones. So what will happen is they will change the value to this cell as well to become 1. This could be this is called surrounding one pattern data background basically, but there are many possibilities. So this cell can impact only this one, this write 0 can impact uh, all three cells to change its value, or these three cells initialized to specific value can play part and change the value stored here as well. So there are many possibilities. So we need to kind of prepare algorithms and all the we need to identify what are the ways to kind of sensitize these conditions, and then how to detect those things as well. Of course, I mean, we cannot consider all the permutations combinations, because I mean, if we consider that, then I think this would be a never-ending story. So what we do is we simplify things. So and that approach I will kind of try to explain how we try to go about it. Here I'm showing different backgrounds that we try to implement on the memories, and the intent of each background is different. So let's say very simple kind of faults we are able to catch using all writing all the memory with all zeros or all ones. We call these as solid backgrounds. then there are certain kind of faults, especially these coupling kind of faults. They require checkerboard or checkerboard bar kind of data background. So every neighbor having a different value stored than the targeted cell. So that's why it's called checkerboard. Then there are other variants like stripes. So all these three would be zeros and all these three would be ones. So we can make column stripe or row stripes, and we can make this surrounding one or surrounding zero kind of data backgrounds as well. So all these backgrounds, they they are found useful in capturing certain kind of faults. Okay, going further, yeah, bridging fault. I think this is also we know what it is. So any two wires, because they are going together, so any short can cause an issue. It would be and bridging or bridging. So let's move forward. Let's look at one specific cell fault which is appearing mainly in memories only. So let's say we are doing a read one operation. So what happens is, let's say when this word line is selected and this bit was having zero, a zero was stored at the false node and one at the true node. So we initialize these bit line bar to one. What happens is when this current will kind of get discharged through this path. So what happens is, this current, because it is going through this path, this is a resistive path. This is never, an ideal path. So what it can do is it can raise the voltage of this ground, which we call as ground bounce. So there could be a blip uh, at this voltage. At this node basically, which should be lesser, but it would be a blip which we call as a read bump voltage. And let's say if this read bump voltage, it basically crosses the threshold voltage of a weak cell, what it can do is, in place of this node getting this one getting discharged here, if this voltage is high, what it will do is it will block this path and it will cause this to get written by one. And once it is when it is temporarily one, because of this feedback loop, the value will toggle. So we are reading something, but then we are writing, a opposite value is written on the gets written on the cell. So this is called a read destructive fault, that we have read something, but we have destroyed the original value that is present. Excuse me, present on the memory cell. So such kind of faults appearing on the memories. There are many variations. So I'll not talk about all of them for the to be in time. Let's say. Then the issues with periphery. Now the problem with these sense amplifiers and pre-charge circuits are that these faults could be at any place. The problem is, even in academia, I have never seen a detailed analysis or detailed, say, study on the faults related to these, because it is very hard to kind of see and categorize them ultimately. Because, if we go about it, it will have uh, thousands and thousands of possibilities. Where the fault can come and what the impact of that fault could be. So the limit would it would be limitless kind of study. So what industry does is, because we cannot wait for all this analysis to happen. So what we do is, some research has been done, and that results basically research, it maps all the faults, and we all the all faults appearing because of problems here in the pre-charge circuit or sense amplifier. We can map these faults to a problem in the memory cell array, and we can categorize them to be completely open, let's say completely open or short or bridge kind of faults, and they can be treated as a stuck-at faults. So just to simplify the analysis, if we try to understand, I think this is very easy to understand as well. So let's say pre-charging is not happening correctly. There is some fault somewhere, and pre-charge is not happening. So what would happen is, the bitline bar are not at the same value. So whenever we are reading out anything, so it would look like, let's say, one of the bit lines is kind of stuck at some specific value. So ultimately the result would be, we can see, we cannot differentiate if the bit line is stuck at 0 or the memory cell is having that value stored. So we will treat such faults as a stuck at stuck at fault model, and we'll try to analyze and identify the issues keeping that in mind. So if we are able to find, let's say, a stuck at problem, let's say a memory cell is stuck at 0, then this is next level. Then how to isolate between if that stuck at 0 is because of the cell, or because of the problems in pre-charge circuitry, or maybe sense enabled circuitry. So that is next level. That is called diagnostic, but that would require a different kind of approach to be taken. But there we have more flexibility. We can run more tests. We can apply different other kind of algorithms. But just to screen the memories, we treat the problems here as if these are problems of memory cell array. I mean, this is the intent is to just limit the scope of the problems. Then yeah, more examples in the let us say read write enable circuitry. So if the sense amplifier was slow, so it would result in different kind of fault. Uh, SWDF also slow write driver fault, pre-charge circuitry fault, then speed related things. So yeah, so all these can be mapped on cell array, as I said in the last slide. But yeah, there could be multiple other faults as well. For example, speed related faults. So let's say that the addresses are not changing correctly. I mean, in time, let's say, or the breach, or the discharge that is supposed to happen during the run during the read operation, the discharge on the bit line or bit line bar, that is not fast enough, or in certain sense, I mean, sense amplifier is not able to identify the solution in a short time frame. So these cannot be mapped on memory cell array faults. So to what happens is, I mean, to catch such kind of faults, there are very specific operation sequence are needed. Okay, to give you one example, let's say, let's go to this ground bounce situation. So what happens is, it might be possible that we are doing one read operation and the voltage is okay, it is getting discharged, but this voltage bump is not big enough to cause it to flip. But still, having said that, it is still a bit ground is a bit raised. If we do another read, another operation, we recharge these bit lines again, and then we again read, even if it is 0 here, the same thing will happen again. So if we do it cumulatively, the ground bounce voltage, ultimately this read bump voltage will become sufficiently high that will cause this cell to get flipped. So this means this requires reading multiple, doing multiple reads one after another, and in very quick time frame. In a way, I mean, at speed reads. So to capture such faults, we require multiple reads going forward. Then some of the faults require specific addressing directions as well. For example, if we talk about address delay faults, so address decoder faults, let's say the faults in address decoder, that would require going from, let's say, if we have to test if it is working at speed, then what we need to do is, we need to jump and jump from address which corresponds to a location of cell 0, let's say, to the maximum address. So all address bits should jump from 0 to 2 raised to power n. So basically exact complement to capture at speed faults. Then there are some other variants, like, I mean, we need to go shifted address in and shifted addressing mode. So let's say 4-bit address will traverse from 0000 to 0010, and then 0100. So 1 is basically traveling, shifting. So such kind of addressing sequence is needed. So all these are challenges. So these challenges are not seen in digital circuitry. So what we need to do is to test the memories. We we need to list down all these failures that might come. We need to take care of all the operation sequence that are to be kind of implemented on the memory, and then all the addressing related things as well. So all these things are called, I mean, all these considerations are called sensitization and then detection mechanisms. Giving more kind of say examples. So stuck at fault. Okay, these are just notations. So I'll not go into detail. So stuck at fault, transition fault, write destructive faults. So what happens is we are writing something, but then we have destroyed a value on some other cell, or we are trying to write a 0, but the cell has flipped into 1. When we are trying to write a 1, it has flipped into 0. So this is called write destructive fault. Then read destructive fault. Dynamic read destructive faults. So depends on speed. And this is, I think, idempotent read fault. So we are trying to read 1, but memory is on 1, but it is giving out 0 rather than 1. So multiple variations are there. So considering all these things, what has been done is we basically bifurcate or divide all these faults into fault primitives. And to give you an idea, just it's a categorized kind of a chart which shows what kind of faults can come. So we'll focus right now only on single port kind of faults. Multi-ports, and it's a different universe altogether with multiple say complexities. So we'll focus on single port. So we can see single port faults can be simple faults like static, dynamic, or weak, let's say, which can be caught if we run faster. So static and dynamic, static means, I mean, stuck at kind of faults. Dynamic are, let's say, we have to do some transitions. Then again, statics can also be divided into two categories. So single cell or multi-cell. Single cell means, I mean, yeah, single cell is stuck at 0, stuck at 1. It is not dependent on anything else. But let's say multi-cell means, I mean, yeah, if we write 1 at one cell, the other cell flips. Similarly for dynamic, we can convert, I mean, divide it into different categories, single cell and multiple cells. So if we see this, so simple cells basically they don't interfere with other systems, other faults appearing in the memory system. So they are independent. No problem with that. Relatively easy. But linked fault, the other category is linked fault. Linked fault is when, yeah, the influences the behavior of other faults present in the behavior. So some problem in one cell or one transition in one cell will cause a transition in another cell. So, or it's a combination of basically, I mean, multiple transition happening on different locations. The problem with this is, I mean, to identify link faults, the problem is they can lead to fault masking as well. For example, okay, if we treat like, I mean, okay, we are writing somewhere something on cell 1 and cell 2 is getting flipped. But there is a possibility that, so this is one fault, but there is a possibility that there are two problems and ultimately the behavior would be correct. I mean, sometimes. So this can lead to fault masking as well. So the two wrongs are making it right here. So that is also a possibility. For static, basically, they are sensitized mostly by a single operation. We try to write 0 and try to read as 1. Will be able to capture it. But dynamics, they require more than one faults. So let's say we would need to, let's just say, do two reads in consecutively. Then single cell, yeah, man, single cell kind of fault. What it means is that it involves only single cell. So if we have to capture a fault in one cell, we need to just sensitize that cell, read or do a read or write on that cell, and we'll be able to capture fault. But multiple or coupling faults, but basically they require, I mean, more than one cell. So what we need to do is we need to do a write and read operation on one cell to find a fault on the second kind of cell. So many challenges, all these things. So just to find further, give a kind of feel of how memory testing is different than uh, digital circuits. So this is a, let's say, digital circuit. I've just taken a behavioral model. And then functional model is, yeah, it is implemented through digital gates. And this is logical model, electrical model, and ultimately we are reaching to physical model. To capture the problems here on the digital part, we just focus on maybe 2 or 3 fault models and use the logical model. So we work at for stuck at fault, transition fault, and delay faults, part delay or short delay, whatever faults are there. But we are working on their logical model level. So it's a structural kind of netlist which is read in, which is for the tools also, it is easier to process, faster to process. But there are certain faults which require, I mean, if we want to go for say more analysis, so especially on the new technology nodes, we have to do cell aware faults or bridging faults, and they require us to use electrical models rather than logical models. So these electrical models are more, say, let's say heavier versions and require special kind of treatment. So special tools, everything special has to be different. And bridging ultimately works on the layout model. It extracts information related to which two wires are going together and tries to identify the where the probability of having a bridge is more. So it works on that part. This is digital part. But for memories, I mean, you can see there are stuck at transition, neighborhood, dynamic read, idempotent read, then read destructive, write destructive, retention, stuck open. So many say more fault models. And for the memories, we cannot work on this logical part because there is no logical model available, because the depth is such that, I mean, the number of bits are such that, or number of nodes are so many that we cannot really represent them in a logical model for the tools to be able to analyze. So they have to work on this part, if at all. So let's say ATPG tools that we talk about in the industry, for example, Tetramax or Modus from Cadence, or Encountered or from Mentor Graphics. All those tools work on this part to give good results. For cell aware they need this thing, but for memories these things are accurate representations are not available at all. So they cannot really work and generate patterns and do whatever is needed to identify the faults of the memories. So I hope, I mean, this basically clarifies as to what are the challenges compared to digital circuitry, I mean, on the memories. And this is not all. The memory has many complex functionalities. So redundancies. Redundancy means when, yeah, we have some data bits to write or read, but in case something goes wrong, we have a backup. So redundancy, this feature is very heavily used, especially with the lower technology nodes, because this helps in recovering the yield of the memories. So when we are implementing, I remember clearly that when we implemented something I taped out a chip in 7 nanometer, and the yield was around 30%, only 30%. 30 chips out of 100 were kind of correct. 70% they were thrown away. It was all waste of money, waste of time, waste of everything. But we implemented redundancy in the same. We had implemented redundancy in that GM chip, and through repair mechanism, we were able to recover a yield up to. We were able to reach up to 70% yield. So, 40% yield we were able to recover. So that's why, I mean, these features are very useful, but these features have their own, say, problems in terms of testing requirements, in terms of new fault models that are to be implemented, new flows that are to be implemented to test all these things. And then there are many other faults as well. Bit byte write, but for multiple memories, I mean, number of ports are more, so number of issues are more. Some specific memory specific features which we are not allowed to really understand, but we just need to implement a specific order of say sequencing just to activate some faults and capture them. Then there are debug modes. I mean, some features are present in the memories which allow the memory we allows us to control the memory if we want to run it fastest possible speed, or do a trade-off between the speed and leakage. and play around with that. So again, I mean, for different conditions, I mean, different test requirements are there. So, and new technologies are again, I mean, it's very well understood. I think for FinFET or gate all around, I mean, the problems are, or the number of fault models are increasing. Considering all this and ITRS, I mean, it already says, I mean, more than 80% of the chip area will be occupied by memories. I mean, it's a possibility. I mean, already happening. So ultimately, what I want to say is, I mean, the chip yield is proportional to the memory yield. So the issues that we are observing in the chips, in the functional logic, they are far less compared to the memories that we are getting. So the example that I gave, I mean, the chip yield, which was we got 30%, and after repairing the memories, the chip yield increased from 30 to 70%. So memory yield is ultimately contributing significantly to the chip yield. The now memory yield, increasing it further would require more redundancy resources to be put in, which is extra hardware. But ultimately, if we would have implemented bigger, higher redundancy features, the chip yield could have gone up to 80 or 85% as well. So memory is kind of deciding how the chips would be finally. Integration and fast validation of memories is a challenge. So speed, area, mission criticality, power goals, I mean, they are all kind of being driven by the memories now. Memories are, I mean, a lot of say cells packed together. So when they are when the memory is working, so it creates a lot of localized power consumption nodes. So there the current requirements are very high when the memories are getting tested. So all these things are needed. Newer technologies will not survive without DFY, so which is designed for yield, which means, I mean, we have to implement memories with repair capabilities. And when we are implementing memories, we have to really already think about as to how the implementation can impact the yield and all those things right at start. So we need is not as much for a better memory, but for a complete memory solution, which involve tests as well. So all these challenges. So the test problem is, yeah, given a set of faults, I mean, this is how we start to work. Given a set of faults in a circuit under test, how do we obtain a set of parameters, a set of patterns, which gives us very high fault coverage? So the approach basically is we need to identify what we want to test through fault modeling. So we prepare a list of faults, which all faults we want to test. For example, stuck at or transition or dynamic resisting fault, dynamic read destructive faults, write destructive faults, stuck open faults, what kind of faults we want to test. Then once we identify, we know what type of faults are kind of we are targeting or we are observing in a particular node. The next problem is how to generate test patterns for those faults. Because I mean, as I explained earlier also, specific faults require specific sequence of operations in terms of read-write operations or in terms of addressing sequences. So the next set of problem is how to generate that. So what to test and how to test. Then okay, we know what to test, we know how to test, but how about how to measure it? How to test the quality, how the test quality is measured, how to really see, I mean, how many faults are covered and how we can fault simulate and kind of knock off from the list of faults, how to do that. So all these things are big problems. And then let's just say we try to solve all these issues. We picked up say 500 fault models. We understood what sequence the pattern should be generated, what I mean operation should be done on the memory. Okay, through which we'll be able to capture most of the fault. Let's say again, I mean, calculating it exactly is a very difficult job. But then how are we going to apply it? That is another problem. And how the test vectors are applied and how the results are evaluated. They're applied externally from the tester or internally, let's say from within the chip. So all these questions are they lead to the approach that we take. Now I'll take a simple example. So for example, what we do is, I mean, for ATPG, for the digital circuits, we use ATPG to test. But if we use the same technique to test memories, let's see if it works or not. So taking a simple example of NAND gate. So let's say if we have to kind of test all the faults on this NAND gate, how many patterns we have to apply? There are 2 inputs and 1 output. So if we apply all 4 combinations of the inputs, any kind of fault present on the inputs or extra on the output port or internal to the NAND gate, this will be found out. So this is the principle on which ATPG works. Yeah, of course, it has the say flexibility to be able to do fault collapsing or pattern merging, which might not require us to generate 4 patterns. Rather than 4, we might need only 2 patterns because these 3 can be merged because the behavior is same. So it will lead us to 2 patterns, but still ATPG tools are able to do that. What about memories? So it's just a pictorial representation as to, yeah, memory is internal to the memory. Let's say internal to the chip. Let's say we are able to, okay, how to test this memory? Then we would need specific controls from outside, from the chip level, to be able to do any kind of operation on the memory. For example, we are targeting read destructive fault, so we need to apply multiple read operations on the memories and try to observe the read value when till and let's say we have to do 4 reads consecutively to find if the specific cell has changed, flipped its value or not. So will apply address from outside, then we'll apply chip enable to kind of enable the memory, and then we need to apply the read enable circuitry, read enable value to just to put it in the read state, and we have to give the clock, and we have to continuously read the response on queue, take it out, launch read again, or apply a new clock, read the response again. So we need to continue doing that for 4 times, let's say, to identify the fault. But is it easy? It's not easy. Every single memory we cannot provide control from the top level. I mean, that's the same problem as ATPG also has. That is why when we are converting all the flops to scan flops to be able to kind of apply any pattern anywhere, I mean, internal to the circuitry and not requiring to put values directly from it. But this is a very slow process. So even ATPG also we have kind of shift phase where we are shifting in data from the top level, and then capture phase which applies and captures the fault. But in case of memories, it is multiple folds. So we shift in some value, the values corresponding to WE and CSN address and all that. We apply those values, we capture the response, shift the response out. So it is in a anyways expensive, but still, let's say we try to do that. If we let us try to do ATPG on the memories, what will happen? So as we said here, let's say 2 raised to power n, but 2 raised to power 2 is 4. So let's take simple example as to how we can do. Now the memories are like having many address and data bits. So in the range of 64. And let's say we have a tester which applies stimuli at 1 gigahertz. So to test if memory having number of pinouts, primary inputs as 64, which is a normally medium sized memory, let's say 1K size memory, it would require 585 years. The problem is memory is not combinational circuit. So if we have to treat the sequential nature, by sequential nature, what I mean, you need to apply address, you need to do a chip select, you need to apply a clock, say write or read enable, and then apply a clock. And then after 1 clock cycle, that queue will come. So this is a at least 2 level sequential circuit. So add those things, I mean, which that would ultimately means, I mean, adding the control stage. So if a 64 number of pins and 64 number of pins are let's say inputs, testing it at 1 gigahertz, it will take 50 million years to test one memory. So it is not practical. We cannot adopt this approach. So ATPG is not possible. Then can we apply these? These are also not practical. The testers are not able to reach this level yet. When they are applying voltages in the range of 100 megahertz to 200 megahertz. I've seen very expensive testers which we can operate at 500 megahertz, but 1 gigahertz and considering 5 nanometer technology where we have to run 6 gigahertz, it's not possible. If we compromise here, I mean, we cannot, let's say we don't run the 8 speed, we are not sure we are testing the memory correctly. Again, let us say if we are able to manage this, still are we sure that we are able to apply all the sequences, the vectors in all the possible sequences that we need? So answer is no. So what we do is we divide basically, I mean, the memory test in using, I mean, in three categories. So what first one is we use ad hoc tests. I think this was the original say technique. So what it does is it just reads and writes on the memories. So it applies scan pattern, it's different say backgrounds. So through test patterns, so we apply checkerboard, galpat, walking 10. These are different test patterns, algorithms basically. But they are not able to cover all the faults. So they give coverage, but they give low fault coverage, and the cost is high because it takes a lot of time. The galpat and walking algorithms are very they are very operation intensive, a lot of time. So what we do is, I mean, yeah, we do certain things through these, but the next one is next approach is we go for March tests. So what it is basically most popular right now. It is being used here as well now as well. So it is based on the fault model. What we do is we identify what are the faults that we want to test, and then we devise March tests targeting that fault list. It has linear time complexity and good coverage, let's say. But with newer technologies, we need to keep appending the tests or the patterns that are to be implemented. So new tests are required. So some examples are MATS, March C. There are many variations. I'll give you a hint of what other variants are. Then third, okay, we cover a lot of faults still here. And then for the new faults that are coming, especially with the new technology nodes, we go for fault primitive based March tests. Again, I mean, the problem is again there are so many variations. So what we do is we tend to kind of map them and create simple algorithms. So it's just in a test notation. I'll go very fast. I think I'm running out of time. So what it means is we are doing in any direction, we are doing write 0 on all the memory. Then second operation is we are going from address 0 to an increasing order. It could be row fast or column fast. And we are doing a read 0. After write 0, read 0. And on the same cell after reading 0, we are doing a write 1. And when we have traversed full memory, we are coming back and we are doing a read 1. So this operation will already test a lot of algorithms. So this is what one simple March test is. So one March element, second March element, third March element. So what we do is for stuck at fault, we identify at what we need to do. For stuck at, we need to do a write 1 and then read 1. If we do this operation, we can identify stuck at 0 fault through this stuck at 1 fault. So any operation followed by write 1 and read 1, if we do it consecutively, so we are sure that, and we are making a transition basically from 0 to 1 and 1 to 0, both kind of transition we are doing, and we are kind of trying to read as well. So this will ensure, operation 0 followed by 1, operation 1 followed by write 0. This will ensure we are able to test the transition fault as well. So we identify such, these are called sensitization, and this is, for example, a sensitization condition, operation 0 followed by write 1, and then read 1 is detection condition. So for all the faults, we identify such conditions, and then these operations we merge, and we try to come up with algorithms. So similarly for, yeah, these are just 4 examples: state coupling, read disturbing, and all those things. So intent is we identify such kind of say sensitization conditions and detection conditions, and then we code them in terms of operations. So one example, let's say, okay, what we do is, yeah, let's talk about this March SS. So what it is doing is we are doing write. This is 18N. It's a pretty famous kind of algorithm that is used. So it is what it is doing. It is doing a write 0. Then in the second, so this up means it is writing from location 0 to maximum location. Then it is coming down and it is doing multiple reads to ensure that this write is successful. So in a way, we will be capturing the stuck at fault here. Multiple reads means we will be capturing read destructive fault as well, which is activated in 2 steps, let's say. Then followed by read, we do a write as well, and we do multiple writes as well. So destructive write operation, write test faults also we are capturing. So in a way, we devise a algorithm which is able to capture many of the faults which are present in which we have might have selected in terms of possibilities. Now the question is how to apply these tests. Okay, before that, I just to give some industry standard, say algorithm names. So what they all do. I mean, I'll not go into the details, but this is a small or most occurring kind of fault primitive types, fault types that we observe. And to capture all these things, I mean, there are many algorithms which are there, and we can see some of them are very good. So, for example, this SMAR checkerboard VCD pattern. So this is able to capture almost all kind of faults. This pattern. So which this SMAR checkerboard VCD, of course, is like this, but I mean it involves many more operations. So this is able to capture all these things. But some others are not really not capable. Let's say this LV row bar, it is able to capture only 2 faults, and then this multi-port inference type faults on they are good at capturing, but they will not be able to capture all of them. I mean, they'll not do it fully. So F means full coverage and G means good coverage. So if we are targeting, let's say, all these faults, I mean, in our memory technology, and the foundry says that all these faults can occur, then it is better to go for this SMAR checkerboard VCD kind of pattern or algorithm, which will capture all these faults. But let's say for more mature nodes, or the nodes which don't where memories are not like multi-port memories, they are single simple memories, and more mature more nodes where maybe transistor leakage fault might not appear, destructive read might not appear, some of faults might not appear. Then we need to choose, I mean, which again foundry will give us an indication as to what all faults can appear, and then we have to select from this list. Okay, so we have reached to a solution. What all is needed to be done? We need to implement, let's say, this algorithm SMAR checkerboard VCD. The next problem is how to do that. So I think it's a pretty simple thing. So we all know. So the memory best is the solution to be able to do that. So what we do is, I mean, this memory best is basically a embedded methodology. What it means is it's a hardware that is implemented inside the chip. What it does, it is to self-test and debug various blocks by applying on-chip generation patterns and test vectors at speed. I think this is a differentiating thing compared to the ATPG part as well, and it is comparing the results on the chip itself to generate a pass-fail status, and it can give us a comprehensive failure map. So basically, this is a hardware that is put in, and this all these say algorithms, let's say SMART checkerboard VCD or something. So this is the pattern basically, and we can ask the PMBS to generate those patterns and apply on the memory in at speed manner. So a generic architecture of PMBest, yeah, I mean, memories, it has to work on the memory. So this PMBest will generate it will have a controller which will generate the addressing and data background and everything, apply on the memory, and it will observe the data. It will do a comparison, compare it with the expected data, and give us pass or fail results. It's a generic kind of let's say architecture, and this is what well, this is an old concept, but the key concept that I wanted to kind of introduce to you all was how do we reach this kind of sequence. And I think, yeah, that's all. That concludes my presentation. So I'm sorry, I think I've taken more time than allocated, but any questions, I mean, in last, say, 5 minutes?
Thank you, Nitin, for such a wonderful talk, and you enlighten us on different aspects of the memory architecture and sharing all the information and valuable knowledge of different kind of testing scheme can be adopted with the existing as well as the new technologies. And thank you very much. It's open for a question, sir. You can see on your Q&A session if you find the question on to you.
Can you see Nitinji? Are there any questions?
Uh, I Yep.
Q&A.
Not much. I just received a comment. Wonderful lecture. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. It is indeed wonderful lecture.
Okay. So they're saying week 0 or week 1 faults exist in memory. Reason for such fault. I mean, again, it depends on the precision that we have while implementing. So let's say for smaller technologies, let's say if you have to implement a wire, that requires very precise control on the width and width of the wire in terms of let's say when we are implementing wire using semiconductor technology, we have to do etching, we have to do say masking and all those things. And with lower technology nodes, it may not be possible. I mean, it again. I mean, as I said, if we don't have the correct investment done, or we don't have the correct machines, the wires that are drawn out, they may not be exactly uniform, let's say. So that would mean kind of resistive area, resistive kind of paths, which might do, I mean, through which the leakage could be, I mean, more or less, or all those things. So all these things basically cause the memories to have vault weak 0 or weak faults as well. And second question is, which standard software is used in industry to design and test memories? There is no standard software, but yeah, I mean, as I said, I mean, Cadence, Synopsys, and Mentor. I mean, these are three EDA companies which provide their solutions. They allow to be able to implement any kind of algorithms and all those things. So they provide such solutions, but many companies, they have their own say memory based solution. For example, ST had its own IP when they used to develop a internal IP which was kind of doing it. In terms of standardization, I mean, again, there is no standard as such, but things are going towards standardizing the memory test as well. What is happening is there is a IEEE standard group that is being formed. What it requires is it requires the foundries of the memories to be able to define all information related to memories in a CTL format, in terms of physical implementation, in terms of
राजकुमार
faults
मीटिंग में
that
हूँ, मैं
might
कॉल
come.
करता हूँ भाई आपको.
And based
Okay.
on that, I think the tool have to generate the patterns. So in a way, it would be kind of a standard, but right now there is no. One more question is, have you worked in radiation hardened memory testing? The answer is yes. I did that, I think 5 or 6 years back. Yeah, I think 2012. I have worked on that. Yeah, it was for a space application chip. So that requires a different kind of algorithm, because the memory is also different when it comes to radiation hardened kind of applications. So yep. Any other questions? I hope I'm able to answer questions. Okay. One more question. How to test memory based controller? Memory based is a digital circuit, so that is the job of ATPG. So automatic test pattern generation, that will generate patterns and test the memory based controller in terms of implementation. But of course, I mean, if the memory based controller is working correctly or not, that is part of verification strategy. So verification will test the functionality, but implementation will be tested by ATPG. Okay. Last question, if any. Thank you. Thank you. I think I'm done. I hope I'm able to kind of give some good concepts, and over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Nitin Sharma ji, for accepting our request to deliver your talk on memory, architecture, etc. during this NanoDev 2021. So thank you very much, sir, for enlightening.